Now, let's look at the confessions. You have your copy. Those of you at home who are watching and don't have it, this is the one you want, Oxford World Classics by Henry Chadwick. And on the screen, I have put the outline. So, early years, book 1. What is fascinating in book 1? Well, the fact that he's learning Greek. You see, I mean, that's just absolutely invaluable, this observation from him, from this young man in, say, 364, something like that, where he's trying to learn Greek, and it's hard, and he doesn't like it. Isn't that fun to think about that? That here, isn't it? I mean, when you think of a mark in the evolution of civilization, here is someone, the most brilliant man alive, probably, and he's finding it hard to learn Greek. So that's the change from the time of Cicero. Cicero and Julius Caesar just live with Greek. It's just natural to them. Now we get to Augustine, and it's hard to learn Greek. And soon, very, very soon, he died in 430, there won't be anybody learning it. See, very soon, you're going to have people just as smart as him who won't know it. And they'll only have Latin and then whatever other language that they're speaking. So we're going through a huge transition now in Western civilization. So he hated learning Greek, and he didn't like Homer. Just think of that. He didn't like Homer, but he liked Virgil. Isn't that great? He didn't feel close to the Greeks. He didn't feel close to Homer and the Iliad. Imagine where that puts us again, you see. Of course he doesn't. It's totally unchristian, you know. It's awful. It's all that vengeance. No, he doesn't like that. But he likes Virgil. Why? Because Virgil's the story of Rome, and he's a Roman. He thinks he's a Roman, so he likes Virgil, he likes Rome. So that's book 1. Book 2, the adolescence. Let's just remember who he is and where he comes from. Father is a Roman official, a Roman administrative official, not fancy, super rich, but successful enough so his family is growing up and living the life of successful Roman citizens with some standing, with some connections, and, most important, a situation to make sure that their son gets to go to college. So they know they're already, checking into all those special prep things that you do in Palo Alto, all that. They were already looking into that to see that little Augie would get in to Harvard, or Yale or Princeton. So he has parents who care about him. His father's a very good man, but he's not a Christian. And his mother is a very good woman, and she is a Christian. Well, there's another interesting thing if you just think about it, that here you have this family in North Africa, in this city close to the coast, close to Carthage, where this young man is growing up in a family, and his father is a Roman who worships, the Roman gods, and his mother's a Christian. So, isn't that interesting? You can imagine that it would be complicated, and he's not a Christian. Augustine's not a Christian. He doesn't start out his life as a Christian. His mother is, but he's not. Then in book 2, wonderful little incident, because I just want you to see how revealing is, page 26, coming of age. Young Augustine writes in his book, Coming of Age, that his father knows that he has now entered into, adulthood, male adulthood. He says they go to the bathhouses. And everybody went to the bathhouses, and if the men were in the bathhouse, they would have all their clothes off. And so then his father knew that he had come of age. Now, isn't that interesting, a little detail like that you would put that in? And, I'll leave it to your imagination to have what the father figured out. But it's such an intimate detail. It's the kind of thing that no Roman writer, Cicero, would have ever put in a book that he was writing. And yet Augustine thinks he should tell you everything. And then on 27, which is interesting that this detail follows right up, having been in the bathhouse, his mother warns him against fornication. Well, you bet she was warning him against fornication. Her husband had just come home from the bathhouse and said, look you better talk to Augie because he's going to be up to no good. And it'll be fast. So he says he was in the streets of Babylon luxuriating in pleasures. So Augustine starts out his life. He's not a Christian, and he's not living a good moral or ascetic life at all. He is loving the good old indulgent Roman life, and including sex and girls, and he's soon going to have a girlfriend. Now, we come to the all-time example of peer pressure. I know, but it's such a great It's such a corny, great pun that I can't ever pass it up. Hey, don't you think it's great? Huh? Peer pressure? I've been laughing all week waiting to use that. I hope everybody likes it. In any case, it is in book 2, chapter 8, and he tells us about his life of sin and bad behavior, page 28, 29, and 30. And I put up the actual text because, of course, I'd love us to be able to read a lot of the text in the book, but we don't have time. So I'm going to read you this from book 2, chapter 8. Young guy with his friends out doing no good. But I did not realize this. This is page, 27, I think. I did not realize this. And went on my way headlong with such blindness that among my peer group I was ashamed not to be equally guilty of shameful behavior when I heard them boasting of their sexual exploits. Now, this is part of the fascination of this passage, is his confession that he wanted to be evil, he wanted to be bad, he wanted to enjoy it, and he wanted his bad friends, the radicals, to appreciate him. Their pride was the more aggressive, the more debauched. Their acts were, they derived pleasure not merely from the lust of the act, but also from the admiration that it evoked. In other words, being bad and doing bad things got you standing, you see, just like today. What is more worthy of censure than vice? Yet, I went deeper into vice to avoid being despised. Watch that. Watch the psychology of this and how brilliant this is. I went deeper into a vice to avoid being despised, and when there was no act by admitting to which I could rival my depraved companions. In other words, all his companions are boasting, I knocked over the old woman, or I kicked the dog, or I did this. Then he'd make something up, see, that was worse. So I used to pretend I had done things, bad things, that I had not done at all, so that my innocence should not lead my companion to scorn my lack of courage, lest my chastity, or meaning his good behavior, be taken as a mark of inferiority. Now, isn't that brilliant? But I'll bet there are guys in this room who know exactly what he means. And remember in high school, being around bad guys, or being temporarily let into a gang of bad guys. They made a mistake and let you go with them for a taco or something. And so they're all boasting about how they kicked the dog and knocked the old lady over. And so you throw in, I kicked 2 dogs, And in your mind, you've never kicked a dog, and you would never do it in a million years. But right then and there at the taco stand, you want to fit in, so you conjure up worse things than you've ever done, and it's all boisterous and crowing and all. So I used to pretend I'd done things I had not done at all, so that my innocence should not lead my companions to scorn my lack of courage. Such were the companions with whom I made my way through the streets of Babylon. Isn't it wonderful, his phraseology? This is his own town, streets of Babylon. With them I rolled in its dung, as if rolling in spices and precious ointments. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? I rolled in the dung. I got down as low as I could get, rolling in the dung, as if in spices and precious ointments. To tie me down the more tenaciously to Babylon's belly, the invisible enemy trampled on me. He's quoting Psalms there. And I wanted to carry out an act of theft, and did so, driven by no kind of need other than my lack of any sense of or feeling for justice. In other words, he's saying, here I was in my life here at this moment, and I had no order, I had no structure, I had no beliefs. I was a prey to whatever happened, and so I did this crime, I did this theft, just so that I could feel important. Then he goes on, wickedness filled me. I stole something which I had in plenty and of much better quality. My desire was to enjoy not what I sought by stealing, but merely the excitement of thieving and the doing of what was wrong. Very, very important. There was a pear tree near our vineyard laden with fruit, though attractive in neither color nor taste. To shake the fruit off the tree and carry off the pears, I and a gang of naughty adolescents set off late at night after, in our usual pestilential way, we had continued our games in the streets. We carried off a huge load of pears, but they were not for our feast, but merely to throw to the pigs. Even if we ate a few, nevertheless, our pleasure lay in doing what was not allowed. Notice the psychology of this, of how he's carefully dismantling this and explaining his own motivation. I had no motive for my wickedness except wickedness itself. Next passage, which you should really savor, it was foul and I loved it. But isn't that great? I loved it. And I loved the self-destruction. I loved my fall. Not the object for which I had fallen, but my fall itself. My depraved soul leaped down from your firmament tree. He's quoting Psalms. I was seeking not to gain anything but shameful means, but shame for its own sake. The fruit was beautiful, but not that which my miserable soul coveted. I had a quantity of better pears, but those I picked solely with the motive of stealing. I threw away what I picked. My feasting was only on the wickedness which I took pleasure in enjoying. The act has nothing lovely about it, none of the loveliness found in equity and prudence or in human mind, nor was it beautiful in the way the stars are. What fruit had I? He quotes then, the theft itself was nothing, and for that reason I was the more miserable. Yet had I been alone, and note this please, everybody watch this here. Therefore, in bold type, the theft itself was nothing, and for that reason I was the more miserable. Yet had I been alone, I would not have done it. That is so great. That's such a great insight. I remember my state of mind to be thus at the time. Alone, I would never have done it. Therefore, my love in that act was to be associated with a gang in whose company I did it. Now, why this is so great and so brilliant and such brilliant psychology is that with this passage, and there's more, of course, in the Confessions, Augustine breaks out of classical morality. He breaks away from Aristotle and Plato and brings us in the ensuing thousands of years, 1,000 plus, into a more correct psychology. The classical psychology and classical morality, structured in Aristotle and Plato and then followed by Cicero and others, said the following. If we know the good, we will do it. In other words, all of classical psychology, how our mind works, and morality and ethics, was all based on the assumption that the only reason people did bad things was lack of education. Now, you've heard that. You've heard that in our society. You've heard that article. You've read that article. You've read that Time magazine. You've read it. You've heard that. That's not new. We didn't invent that. But that was the classical psychology and classical ethical structure. That for Aristotle, Plato, the Stoics, the Epicureans, for Cicero, and all of Roman ethics, it was very simple. If we educated people, if people could learn the good, they would do it. So if they didn't do the good, it was a lack of knowledge. It was a lack of knowledge. That's the only thing. Now here, with Jesus and Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and now with Augustine explicating the text, we could say, here is a new understanding, a more modern understanding of psychology, most important of all, and that is that some people at some times, and this is going to sound so contemporary to you, you'll think I'm reading the newspaper headline as I say this, some people at some time will actually enjoy doing evil. People sometime, someplace, will enjoy sin, will enjoy evil. Now, you're all flashing on 5 scenes from 5 newspaper headlines of the last month, and you've got them right there. You've got them. You've got a whole list of people. Exactly. Columbine. That's the best example of our recent lives is Columbine, where you kill people and you love it. You absolutely love it. That's what Augustine and his thinking and his psychology and his explicating of morality did to bring the ancient world into a more modern, a more accurate understanding of human beings. In other words, all of classical psychology and classical ethics back to Aristotle and Plato were overturned with this insight, which is essentially a Christian insight, that people can enjoy doing evil. People can enjoy being destructive. And it doesn't make any difference how much you educate them. That's not the problem. It's not lack of information. It's something else. Well, of course, since Augustine is right, and since he's right about human beings, and since he tells you that it was right about him, and since all kinds of people in this room are nodding their head when they read this passage, because they can remember when they, ripped down the tree next door in the sweet little old lady's back garden for the same reason, so that their mean friends would think they were tough. He is right. And so it's a breakthrough. It's a revolution in modern, it's okay to use the word modern because we're moving to present. It's an okay breakthrough to modern psychological understanding of human evil. Because once you understand this, then you can better deal with it. Then you understand why it's happening here or there.